This is the EU Trade Podcast with Samira Rafaela, featuring inspiring conversations on the future of trade in the European Union and beyond.
Welcome at our Trade Podcast. We have a new episode here with my special and dear colleague Marie-Pierre Vedrenne. She's also a member of Renew Europe, and she is also the head of delegation of the French delegation in the group Renew Europe. And she is also the vice chair of the International Trade Committee, a very important committee, I would say, especially in light of the nowadays developments. So we will have a new episode on trade. Marie-Pierre, welcome, and thank you for making the time.
Thank you for your invitation. I'm really happy to participate, especially with you, on this possibility to explain what we are working on trade aspects. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And you are a very strong voice and force on trade. I mean, you are the vice chair of the International Trade Committee, but you have done already amazing files, very tough files also. You are very well known for your work on trade and sustainability, but also on enforcement files. So if we would just start with you, General, can you describe a little bit of your work on trade and sustainability, but also why is the topic of enforcement and trade so important?
I think that Trade Committee in the European Parliament is a key committee to move forward, because trade is not only the question only about exchange. It's more global question, more global issue, in order to tackle all the challenges we face, especially climate change, especially human rights. And trade is a tool to achieve some goals, especially prosperity, to build peace. So it's why it's very important to have a global view and coherency between all our public policy. So it's why I would like to be part on this committee and to work with you on this important issue. And I think that, like you said, it's not a question just to conclude new free trade agreements. The key question is how we implement, how we succeed to have some concrete changes.
Exactly.
So it's why, for me, it's very important since the beginning. And I remember the first audition of Philogan. Remember, it was a long, long time to say that, okay, we have a lot of work on new free trade agreement and we need to build partnership.
Yes.
And free trade, it's key. But we need to really work on enforceability, because if we are not able to demonstrate that we implement and we succeed to have concrete change, in fact, it's a fail.
Yes.
So it's why I think we succeed a lot during this mandate.
Exactly. I totally agree. And this week was very special because we saw like new developments after new developments. We will come to that. I just an example, the Chile agreement, of course, but we have the EU CELAC summit going on this week. We see positive developments, even on Mercosur, but we will come to that later. And what do you think is the main criticism people have when it comes to trade agreements?
It's true, especially, I'm French, you say that, that sometimes to discuss about trade, when you are French, you are always focused on protectionism.
Yes.
And I think that is not the debate. Like I said, the debate is how free trade agreements help us to really succeed.
Yeah.
So it's why it's very important to have a strong discussion on how we want to move forward on trade policy. So it's why in Renew, we push for this. We push to have new free trade agreement and some change to be focused on the content, on the context, not on ideology. Sometimes we are focused when we discuss about trade on ideology and we are liberal in Renew. But it's not a question on liberalism versus illiberalism or versus protectionism. It's a question of how this new free trade agreement, the new content with the reform of TSD chapter, are really build a win-win partnership. Because I think we need to not only to be focused on European also affair, but also on the partnership. That's what they want.
On the other side, indeed, yes.
Of course, sometimes you are focused on some sector, you are focused on some country, and we need to really build also a European policy.
Yeah.
You know that when we are on the technical, we say that it's an exclusive competency, but in fact, it's not the question when you go back in your country. It's not a question of exclusive national competency. It's how it's help us to have more qualified job inside the EU, but also to tackle the challenge. And climate change, for example, is not only a question of European. When you discuss with Chile, when we discuss with our African partnership, they want also to tackle this issue.
Exactly.
So it's why it's very important to have a global vision on this.
And about that global vision, because I think it is very important to take away a part of the criticism there. So part of the criticism is, okay, if we want to work with third countries, take, for example, developing countries, we have some good news now on a new economic partnership with Kenya. And I hope that we will follow with more economic partnerships and trade agreements with African countries. But I mean, you visit also different places in the world. I also do that. And during these conversations, I noticed that they love to have the EU as, you know, the main trading partner. Many countries we visit in the world. But there is criticism on the level of standards. So, for example, when it comes to trade and sustainability, how can we help third countries, but especially developing countries, to comply with the same standards?
I think that you point and you raise the essential issue, because in the European Union, especially now with the Green Deal, it's true that we ask a lot for our own industry. So it's very difficult to ask the same for third country, especially from African partnership, because we don't have the same level of development.
Exactly.
So it's very important to take into account all development in each partnership.
Yes.
But we have common standards. When it comes to climate change, when it comes to human rights, it's very important to increase the engagement on some country. But like we said at the beginning, we need concrete change and changement. It's not a question to have on the paper some requirement. If it's not applied, it's not good for the EU, but also for our partner. So it's why also I think that we also need to be credible. So it's why the question to push, but don't to help the country to be compliant with these requirements. It's not the good way to proceed. So it's why also we are doing our own homework inside the EU. But it's true, for example, when it's come, especially on sustainable issue. For example, I was in Indonesia. They ask a lot of questions about deforestation.
Yes.
And they consider that it's a new protectionism. It's a green protectionism. But in fact, it's not the question of protectionism. It's a question how we help them to be completely part of the challenges of climate change. So it's why it's true that it's very difficult to have this issue on the free trade agreement. But I think it's very important because we need coherency. And our trade policy is also a part of solution. But we need really maybe to exchange more with our partner.
Exactly.
So it's why you know that when we have the conclusion of free trade agreement, we have dialogue with also civil society. We need to increase also this because it's true that if we want some change, the commitment of political states is very important, but we need to have also on board civil society, women, youngness, and maybe we have also to improve this.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree. We call that meaningful engagement, of course, of our stakeholders. And I think that's very important in light of the debate on climate change and the standards that we're trying to develop, that we have the expertise and their expertise, but also their experiences. What I find, for example, very important and also good about the agreement with Chile is that we take into account also the rights of indigenous people, especially when it comes to the extraction of critical raw materials. But also when it comes to deforestation, we often forget that it also touches on the environment of people living in these environments. So yes, I think we're definitely going in the right direction. But when it comes to enforcement of these kind of standards, so on the other side, on the other hand, you say, well, okay, we need to help to develop these countries. I totally agree. But at a certain point, we do want to reach a level where we can enforce, right? Where consequences do need to happen. So how do you see that timeline? Would you say for some countries, we are now a bit more flexible? We help them to develop and then, for example, not have sanction measures in place. And then later on, we look at it another time. Like, how do you see that?
I think it's very important. You know that it's a bilateral negotiation with free trade agreements. So it's why I'm really happy that in New Zealand we include sanctions. Mm-hmm. So now it's a global standards, and we need to go in this direction. But you mentioned Kenya. We don't have it, but we have strong commitment from Kenya to move on sustainability. So maybe sometimes to have sanction, it's not help them to really implement. So it's why it's very important also to really discuss with all our partners. Maybe to have more commitments and to concretely implement this. It's more challenges and it's a big issue. If you have only sanction but not a roadmap of what we want, it's not efficient. So it's why I think we need also to say, you mentioned EPA. So it's why also we have free trade agreement and we have EPA. It's different. So we need to be careful on this issue. And we need also, like I said, to be credible. For example, when we work, especially you mentioned CELAC with Chile, for example, we have also the initiative from Global Gateway. So maybe it's also another tool to really have some change and to help this country to improve solution on climate change, on the health issue, on education. So
the local economy.
So it's why maybe we have also different tools. It's why we don't solve all the issue with free trade agreements. So we don't solve all the issue just to put sanction in place. But it's very important, like you said in your question, to have a strong roadmap and maybe to also work more on united Europe, especially when it comes to other partner, China, because we know that also you mentioned Africa, but it's also the case with country from American Latin. They are waiting also for EU because they have also a lot of pressure on China. So it's why it's always a tricky issue, but we don't want also to don't have high standard just because there is China. We are also credible because the European Union is working and is a united union based on values, but also because we want to tackle the issue of climate change. So we need to be careful, but I think that we are another way from US and China. So we need to continue to be another way.
And I think what I noticed throughout my missions in different places in the world is that the EU is a very wanted, but also reliable trade partner. At the same time, we are lacking behind in some places. I mean, take, for example, some African countries where you see that you mentioned China. China takes a lot of ground. And in light of the geopolitical situation, I think we need to make third countries understand that if they want reliability, credibility, if they want human rights standards, environmental standards, and so on, that they need to work with us, and because we can offer them so many of these standards and values, but also likewise, I mean, it needs to be an equal understanding and equal partnership. But how do you see that difficult relationship with China? Because I mean, they have other views on climate standards, even human rights standards. When you speak about enforcement, How do you see that?
It's a very difficult issue. But like you said, I think that we need to continue to be as a credible partner and to be strong also on what we want and what we are. In fact, and maybe we are working now on our own regulation on critical raw material.
Yes, we are.
I think maybe. What we are working on this, it's a new maybe opportunity to work, especially with this country who have a lot of resources, but they need our help to really create values in their country, not to export critical raw material and to build the values in Europe and also to export. And I think that now Europe is really, especially with the mention of Timor, the new global gateway, working on this to create values in our partner. So it's also a new partnership just behind free trade agreement. So this maybe it's help us to really encourage them and to have the opportunity for them to diversify.
Yes.
Because it's also a question, of course, of rule and to really implement the rule and to respect the rule. But it's also a question of diversification of the fragmented world.
Yes.
So it's why, like you said, they are also waiting for the EU. So we have different tools. We have free trade agreement. We have EPA. We have global gateway. We have partnership, sectorial partnership.
Yes.
So we need to use all this tool.
Yes, the whole toolbox that we're trying to make so strong now. Well, I mean, I think one of our favorite topics, I would say, in the Renew International Trade group of members. Well, a bit cynical maybe, but this week, I mean, I was positive to hear that during the EU CELAC summit. At least there is progress now in the talks about Mercosur. So Mercosur is stuck for a while now. Even in my own country, the Netherlands, Mercosur is a sensitive topic, also in Dutch politics. And like you know, I'm trying to find the right balance here, because at the same time we are like, okay, we are negotiating so long for Mercosur, and we also need our strong, economic relationships with Latin America and the Caribbean. I mean, that's so extremely important. Especially because we are looking for other like-minded countries in the world. And I always very much like what President Macron is saying about, the necessity for having an open and strategic autonomous position in the world. But part of that is that we look for other kinds of relationships with other countries. So Mercosur. Okay, we have some development in the talks this week.
Yeah.
How do you look at that?
Like you said, it's a difficult topic.
Related to trade and sustainability.
Yeah, of course, because in our group, a lot of people are pushing to move forward on this. And I completely understand, like you said, we need to build strong partnership. But like we discussed previously, we not need just partnership. We need to build win-win partnership. So in Europe, we have some doubt and some question. And also in Mercosur, there are some doubt on this. So it's very important. And it's why this summit was very important.
Yes.
We need to exchange.
Yes.
And not only to exchange on Twitter and to say we don't vote and we don't vote. So this kind of summit are very important. And I think that since the beginning, you mentioned the President Macron, it's quite clear our position. We have some doubts on the content of this agreement.
Related to climate and sustainability, right?
Exactly.
I think very legitimate reasons,
Yeah, exactly. Because, sometimes, and the President Macron say at the end of the summit, the big border for EU, in fact, it's in Latin America with French Guyana.
Yeah.
So for us, it's also a big issue because we know that with Amazonia, it's we have in the past a lot of question about the implementation of this free trade agreement. So it's why we push to move forward on this and to have some change and to have more commitment from the Mercosur side. And we are quite skeptical when we have Javier Bolsonaro because we have seen that the deforestation increased.
Yes.
So, of course, Lula says that he wants to move on this issue. So it's very good news because we need to tackle this issue. And we have also a question more of miroir clauses. You know that for the French, the question of reciprocity is key. It's for us, reciprocity is very an objective. We talk about the roadmap, about what we want to achieve. We need to engage a partnership on this because we have the question of competition, not only economic competition, but fair production. And we know that, for example, that we forbid some products inside the EU. So it's not the question to have it on such country because there is a question of health, also not a question only of competition, but also of public health. So it's why we need to move forward on this issue. But for me, it's not miroir clauses. It's not a question to have it and to put it on free trade agreements. It's also the question to build this issue outside.
And maybe for our listeners, just to quickly go back to these mirror clauses. So they hear mirror clauses. Why is that so important for you? What is that about?
Yes, it's true that maybe sometimes it's viewed like a lubie française. It's a question of reciprocity. In fact, it's a question that we, especially with the Green Deal and other legislation that we adopt inside the EU, we push to high standard inside the EU for our industry, for our farmers. So we need reciprocity in this. So it's why we call this miroir clauses. We want, for example, to have the question of pesticide. So maybe we ban some products inside the EU, but we know that we import some products who use this. So
this is also about equal competition.
Exactly. So it's why it's also very important for us to move on this issue. Maybe, like I said, not to have all this aspect inside the agreement, but to work with Mercosur, but also with other third country on this issue. Maybe it's also a question that we need to work on WTO because, in fact, like you mentioned in the beginning, we want to have higher standard, but we need to have on board all the country.
And that we can do through the WTO. We've been there together also in Geneva, the World Trade Organization. So that's I think indeed also the place where we need to start reforming these rules.
Yes, and I think that we have the new Director General, Dr. Ngozi. She is completely involved on this issue, especially on sustainability. I think that she's working a lot to push member states at WTO to be engaged. So it's very important to work on this. For example, when we work in the past and we adopt the CBAM, it was for us, especially for Renew, the compliance with WTO is key. So on this issue on reciprocity, we need to work on this, on the compliance of World Trade Organization. But we know that it's take maybe more time because multilateralism, it's quite difficult at this time with US, with China, with the war in Ukraine.
But you are our WTO rapporteur. I mean, we always look at you when something is going on with WTO. You also go to the ministerial conferences. We have been there one time together.
Yes, it was very interesting. We are together, and I think that we have seen some improvement. For example, we have now an agreement on fisheries. So it's also a question of sustainability, not only a question on fair competition, but also on sustainability. Because we need to have all the country on board. So there is a question with technical issue sometimes on the notification of subsidy. It's important, but to have this discussion at political level with other parliamentary, it's very important. And the dimension of parliamentary is maybe sometimes not enough use.
No.
So we need to continue to be present at World Trade Organization.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Well, thank you so much, Marie-Pierre, for having this conversation. You have a lot of knowledge and expertise, and we will definitely continue to work on these very important trade files. So I wish you good luck. We will go into a summer break now. I think we deserve it following the hard work in the International Trade Committee.
Thank you so much, because you are our coordinator in international trade, and you made an amazing job. So thank you so much, because all the people have to know that the coordinator is a key job inside. So you made a great job. So thank you so much for your job, and also for the invitation.
That's so nice, dear. Thank you. And also to our listeners and watchers, thank you for listening and watching. I hope that you could learn a bit more on trade and the important work that we do on trade here in this European Parliament. And I wish you all the best. See you soon.